Hello, my name is Phil Whitney, and as a consultant for CollegesWales, I've been working with the UK ECVET expert group on another European vet programmes for the last 10 years.
My name is Sian, and I am a UK ECVET expert. I work for CollegesWales in Cardiff, and I write Erasmus Plus consortium applications for the FE colleges in Wales. This short video will help you to use two important ECVET documents to enable the recognition of learning on Erasmus Plus mobility: the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, and the Learning Agreement. Both are available as templates on the Erasmus Plus website and must be used if your project includes ECVET. These templates will be included in your grant agreement if you said you would use ECVET in your application form. So this short video is for you if you already have Erasmus Plus funding for a vocational education and training mobility project, and if you indicated in your application form that you will be using ECVET in your project. Also, this video will be useful even if you didn't refer to ECVET in your application form but have decided that you want to include some elements of ECVET in your project.
Just a reminder that ECVET is a framework which supports the transfer, recognition and accumulation of learning outcomes with a view to achieving a full or partial qualification. It relies on the use of learning outcomes and the use of agreed assessment, validation and recognition procedures. These principles assist with the recognition of learning no matter where it was achieved. In the UK, we've concentrated on using ECVET for geographical mobility, but it can be used in any situation where learning takes place and can then be transferred later on. For example, recognition of prior learning.
The Memorandum of Understanding is an agreement that is put in place before the mobility takes place. The agreement, or the MOU as we will call it from now on, is between the sending and the receiving organisations, and it formalises the ECVET partnership. The MOU provides an overview of the qualification being followed by the participant in the UK. It identifies the learning outcomes that will be achieved on the mobility, and it also refers to assessment, validation and recognition of the learning that will be acquired. There is a template for the MOU. This is sent with your grant agreement if you have said you'll be using ECVET in your application form. It is also available on the UK National Agency's website on the ECVET pages. I'm now going to go through the MOU template with you. Section 1 outlines the objectives of the MOU, saying that it shows trust between the two organisations. Section 2 is where you put the details of the two organisations. There will be tables for more organisations to be added if needed. Just delete the additional tables if you don't need them. Section 3 is where you list other organisations involved in the MOU. For example, the receiving organisation in your application may be a vocational college that is sourcing work placements for your learners in local businesses or companies. If you have the details of the work placement locations, you can list them in Section 3. Section 4 asks for details of the qualifications covered by the MOU. This is where you put the details of the qualification or the qualifications being studied in the UK by your learner or learners. Again, there is room for more than one qualification. You may want to add additional qualifications, an essential skills or a language qualification, for example, as well as the core technical qualification. You don't have to, but the option is there. Again, you can delete the tables that you don't need. Section 5 is where you indicate how long the MOU is valid until, as well as when it will be evaluated and reviewed. It is important at final report stage that you evaluate the ECVET element of your project in addition to other aspects of the mobilities. Finally, the document will need wet signatures from the receiving and the sending organisation. If your project is audited, you will be required to have the original MOU to show to the auditors.
The other essential document is the learning agreement. The learning agreement is a contract signed by all parties in the mobility process, including the learner, in which the learning duration and expected learning outcomes are confirmed alongside mechanisms for assessment, validation and recognition. While the MOU provides an overview of the learning outcomes, The learning agreement goes into the specific goals and content for every learner taking part in mobility. All learners taking part in Erasmus Plus mobility programs must have a learning agreement. By using the ECVET template, it will enable the sending and receiving organisations, together with the learners, to clearly identify the agreed activities to be undertaken during the mobility period and how the learning outcomes will be formally recognised. Although all learners must have an individual learning agreement, which they sign, you may well have a group of participants following the same qualification taking part in the mobility programme. If they're all working to achieve the same learning outcomes, then the content of the learning agreement will be the same or very similar, depending on the specific details of the work placement they are in and the planned assessment mechanisms. We've already said that the use of learning outcomes is an essential element of ECVET. Learning outcomes can be identified from existing units or modules, or they can be written specifically for the mobility period. It may be useful to identify learning outcomes from qualifications other than the main programme or qualification to reflect additional competencies achieved during the mobility period, for example, personal, social or languages. For most VET mobility periods, it will probably only be realistic to cover a few learning outcomes from one or more units. However, for longer mobility periods, such as Erasmus Pro, it may be possible to achieve complete modules during the time overseas. It is important to not only involve staff in the preparation of the learning agreement, but also the student, so that they are fully engaged with the process and know exactly what is expected of them during their mobility period. As well as identifying the learning outcomes to be achieved, it is also vital to have a clear understanding of what is needed to evidence assessment and communicate this clearly to the host partner. Be realistic about what sort of evidence can be provided in the time available. You should ensure that learners are aware of how and when they are to be assessed and what evidence they and the host partner must provide. It is likely that the actual assessment for most short-term mobility periods would be by an accompanying tutor. However, when the assessment is being carried out by the receiving organisation, particularly in longer duration mobility periods, it is important to discuss carefully assessment practices with the host partner, as they may differ from those at home. You should also discuss arrangements for the relevant awarding organisations to see whether there are any potential issues about accepting evidence of assessment from the host partner. Learning achievements should be recorded in a personal transcript, such as the Europass Mobility Certificate. While preparation of the learning agreement takes place before mobility, it remains the ultimate guiding document during mobility to ensure that the activities and assessment processes are in line with those agreed by all parties before the start of the geographical mobility period. Validation and recognition are the final steps in the mobility process when the learner returns to their home institution. Validation requires that staff in the home institution ensure that evidence of learning assessment and achievement is sufficient to meeting internal quality assurance processes and comparing targeted learning outcomes, as detailed in the learning agreement, to learning which has been actually achieved, assessed and evidenced. Recognition is the formal process of attesting officially achieved learning outcomes through the award of credits, units or qualifications.
This video has been a whistle-stop tour of the MOU and the learning agreement. As indicated earlier in the video, there are ECVET pages on the UK National Agency's Erasmus Plus website. On these pages you will find templates, case studies and other useful documents. There is also an email address that you can contact the UK National Agency if you need further advice and guidance. They may put you in touch with an ECVET expert for more detailed information. The case studies on these web pages are real practical examples of current practice in the use of MOUs and learning agreements in Erasmus Plus mobility projects. You can read about or listen to a number of organisations' experiences of using ECVET, which will help you to include and implement ECVET in your project or projects.
The use of ECVET can lead to enhanced mobility experience for learners and a more beneficial relationship between partner institutions. It brings a structure and focus to mobility programs for both learners and organisations. Learners see tangible outcomes to the mobility period, and formal recognition of learning acquired abroad means that learners may no longer have to repeat or catch up on missed units or elements of learning on their return. For practitioners, the use of ECVET allows for improved design and enhanced quality assurance in the delivery of mobility programs, especially through the use of learning outcomes. We really believe that ECVET can bring added value to your mobility program. But don't just take our word for it. Check out the stories which Sian mentioned earlier from VET organisations like yours to see how they have used it to provide a great Erasmus Plus experience for their learners. We do hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching. Goodbye from Sian and myself.